It is now time for me to conclude this conference. And last night's gala dinner evening. These two events were very rich events, and many of you are still with us. I promise I won't be too lengthy in my conclusions, but François, you said so very clearly. It's both a novel and a long-standing issue that insurers should try to push back the limits of insurability. And according to Times, they do it with different topics and under different ways and means. What you've said, basically, it's a question of running risk, which are already insured, and to see how, with new technology, with the new emerging issues, we can expand cover for these conventional risks, and also with new emerging risks. You mentioned a few. And basically, among these new emerging risks, you have a mix of risk, which I would call a gigantic risk, that is systemic risks, be they hyper-terrorism, global pandemics, the cyber security risks, which have massive, gigantic impacts, combined with newer, smaller risks, which are day-to-day risks, new forms and types of mobility, autonomous cars, scooters, foot scooters. They are new practices, new phenomena, new usage that insurers have to respond to because they are part of the demands that society is putting on insurance companies. Now, we addressed many topics, many themes. If we are to group them together, basically, the conference was organized to meet three key factors. We spoke initially about regulations and the regulatory environment and landscape. The governor just discussed this. We had interesting topics with a double bind, which was mentioned by the finance ministry. That is, on the one hand, regulations wanting to protect consumers, legitimately so, to protect and protect more and not running any risk, while on the other side, encouraging the economy with risks to be taken. How can you reconcile both? You need to come up with the right balance. Have we found the right balance? Question mark. I would say that the panel session we had earlier demonstrates that there's no agreement on this tipping point or on this equilibrium, as a number of countries have become aware that investments which should encourage economies are not there, and the idea that all this could generate a systemic risk, as by preventing growth and hindering growth, behavior is deterred, and on the political level, more and more, there are more and more people who consider that regulations have been hindering growth and have been rejecting regulations jointly with all of the system, and this will be hindering the growth of the European project. And it is said that by 2020, 2021, when we address prospects, all this would be very fine and rosy if we were in a business as usual scenario, but there will be a number of issues, including Brexit and the upcoming European elections, and the question is to know whether we can last or whether more quicker decisions should be taken, and there will be measures which need to be taken, which haven't been taken yet, but there is consensus by a number of governments, by a number of market participants, which consider that it is high time now that decisions are taken, as the clock is ticking, and as General MacArthur said, lost battles can be summarized in just two words: too late. So we've addressed the construction work, everybody agreeing that we have a huge issue with the construction insurance cover. And Bernard mentioned it in his speech. Who is to blame? How is it that we find ourselves in a situation when people who are not even able to fulfill their business operations in their home countries have the freedom to operate in other countries? This is huge gross malfunction that is against common sense. So the finance ministry last night told us that at the European level, action needed to be taken rather than just staying with empty words. And I would like to pay tribute to this. The second topic we mentioned was new technology, and in this respect, we got lots of very interesting points. Again, a double bind statement. Those who were here with us last year remembered that our technologist guest from the west coast of the US said that it was great with the insurance companies. Insurance was a great industry where lots of efforts were done not to deliver the services they were paid for. And this year we heard someone who did not come from California, but still from the US, and who explained to us that the insurance industry was lagging behind and would be disrupted, that insurers pretended they responded, but that in actual reality they were lagging behind other industries, and we were not realizing what tsunami wave would be hitting us. Now, an interesting number to mention, which connects with the issue, 2.7 billion. 2.7 billion is the cost of natural disasters for the last 3 years in France. It's also the amount of the venture capital equity which was invested in the US in the startup companies of lean insurtech. And we heard that was an interesting proxy to measure the risk of disruption, and I found this quite valuable as a point.
So on these matters, on the digital matters, that is, we've given answers which have been part and parcel, piecemeals. We've explained how we've made digital progresses. There are two heads on this. There are some positives that we've developed, and at the same time, the risks that are incurred on privacy and on the arrival of platforms, the management of data. We have tangible problems. We're talking today about the PACTS Act, that is LOM Act. There will be a debate, and we're working now in France. We had an agreement with automakers to work on how we manage data and the provisions for insurance to give automatic in the case of a claim. It's the only way to settle them quickly, and economically it's in the interest of everyone in terms of time and money for the insurers and for the policyholders. But it raises unheard of problems, and that we need to invent problems with at the same pace as technology. And there's the weather issue, which is striking for people who, like me, have been following this debate. It's obvious that today, and it's, after all, an ethical victory. It's a matter which stands as obvious. It was not the case not long ago. There were doubts, but now it's obvious. And at the same time as it is obvious, we can see that the collective response tends to step back, given the U.S. position, as mentioned by Jean Josel earlier on. And at the same time, there's a real awareness in the industry. Every professional evokes without, the investments they're making in this place, their commitment, and with the COP21, if we've made a major step, it's thanks to the private sector, which has totally embraced this collective effort. So what are the answers that we can take away from the debates? Well, several ones. First of all, that it's important to get insurance. The debate we had on St. Martin was a call to action. Certainly, there's some people that, a good part could have been insured. Not all of them. It's and the President of the Republic of France, who went back to went to St. Martin, he was courageous in saying that it's true the knee-jerk reaction is to look for support from or subsidies from the state. And the President said very clearly to people, you need to get an insurance cover. Therefore, it's an element, a general element, it was especially in the case of St. Martin, but generally speaking, that gap which exists is an opportunity to be filled, and we need to find a way whereby we can get closer, nurture that demand and spirit and find an answer for it. And then We need rules. If there are no rules, there might be an anti-selection. Only those who have an interest who would be responding. Therefore, the system would not be working. We need rules, therefore, and we must be aware and include the new elements of our knowledge. Well, there are some positives. For example, in the ELO Act in France, which has just been put into force, we've adopted a system for systematically doing some research into the areas that are problematic and see whether in the soil, if there's some drought, to see if there could be a collapse of homes. And this drought issue is more and more topical, doesn't look as good on the TV as the pictures or the images from a storm or a hurricane. I'm not trying to be provocative in terms of communication. These images are cold, which then act with a distance, whilst the images of catastrophes are immediate and more dramatic. So this explains also a difference in the area of awareness, and today there's definitely an awareness about those risks, which, by the way, exist. And the roundtable mentioned the study on the 25 years to come. It's available for those one. It's on our website, but when you leave this room, you'll have access not only to our work on cyber risks, on cyber insurance, but also to all the works that have been carried out by our federation with different partners on weather. And please, I urge you to look at them. They're very educational and extremely well illustrated. Likewise, there are new forms of insurance which are made possible thanks to new technologies. We've talked about agricultural insurance, which is quite interesting. You can see here that we are victims. We are typically in an area which may be more than others undergoing bad weather and has a hard time in priming things because they're too few in being insured. Therefore, the mutualization is not adequate enough, and because of that, it's expensive. By being expensive, it's some kind of vicious circle that we need to break up in two ways: either through the state acting directly, but it's true at the same time, if you really want vote against Europe, it's enough to explain what is the subsidy mechanism of agricultural insurance. After 4 Alka-Seltzers, you give up understanding, so don't be surprised as it doesn't work. And it irks everyone because it consists of saying 2 years later to people, the share of subsidies that we were ready to grant 2 years earlier. All of this doesn't make sense and it cannot work. So we need therefore to simplify. At the same time, alongside this simplification, there are new forms of insurance which today are being worked out thanks to the satellite, to drones, and therefore with parametric insurances that allow simple, quick, efficient responses and should therefore simplify access to these professions, which is quite important. So these are a few examples. I could develop others. At any rate, in conclusion, the responses, which are the ones that were outlined throughout the day, are, on the one hand, you need a legal framework whenever difference. Prefect Gustin said that we had to invite a few relative to the devils which have hidden themselves in the co-op law. The French co-op law or act is something that the whole world envies us. We need rules at any rate in order to respond to demand. We need to develop our knowledge. It was mentioned by several speakers, and therefore we see that companies are investing. We had an example of this a while ago, and we need insurance and reinsurance, and major investments and intellectual investments were made in order to better understand this phenomena. Prevention and public-private cooperation matter, and also more generally speaking, everyone mentioned on this, and I will conclude on this. It's the culture of risk. It's something intangible but quite essential, and which does not exist in our country in a developed way, and does not exist, generally speaking. That's the feeling we have in Europe. I have a personal experience. I was by accident in San Francisco when there was a huge earthquake in 1989, which was the most significant one on the Richter scale. And in addition to the spectacular way of seeing under your steps the earth being shattered, and at 4 p.m. there's a lot of dust, so it's really night, and all the pipes are breaking up, and the light goes away. What is striking is the resilience of the U.S. society, because at that specific moment they know they stop. They know what they are supposed to do. Those who support to be in charge of security, they organize traffic. There was no panic. There was San Francisco Stadium was full. They were supposed to start the baseball final match. The stadium were sort of applauding, did the hola, and when they stopped, what happened? People just applauded. And they left the stadium very quietly. What would happen in a European stadium if something like this occurred? So it's a culture. It starts from the very young age, and this is why I think we need to think about this already at school. And the prefect was talking about the Japanese Day. We need to find a way whereby we can sensitize the public in a collective way around a cause which is of a general interest. And in many natural disasters, the victims are victims due to poor reflexes. Typically, the person who wants to get out of their garages. So there are many bad reflexes because they were not ingrained into the minds of people, and therefore that dimension is extremely significant, that culture of risk, and it is our duty, I believe, we insurers, to contribute to this and promote it. At any rate, very quickly, this is what I wanted to share with you. I thank you. It's 5:30, and thanks for all of you. Thanks for staying so numerous here. I think you have felt that we have learned many things today, and we'll try to digest all of this and come back with more imagination next year.